This story is packed with intense drama and emotional twists. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about love, vengeance, and the true meaning of family. A lavish wedding in Melbourne, or perhaps a calculated act of revenge dressed up as a party. Hayden Sterling, a high-flying CEO, never imagined that the grand display of his success, carefully designed to humiliate his ex-wife, would become the stage for his own personal catastrophe. He never expected her to arrive with a teenager, a boy so uncannily like him that his very presence would shatter Hayden's arrogance and bring his perfectly orchestrated charade crashing down. In that single moment, what should have been a triumphant celebration turned into a whirlwind of hidden truths, raw emotions, and a furious reckoning that would open the doors to a bitter battle for redemption and the rediscovery of what family really means. Trust me, you won't be able to look away. We want to know, what time are you watching this and where are you from? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Hayden Sterling's life seemed perfect, but deep down, he carried a wound that hadn't healed in 15 years. The distant roar of a packed stadium during the footy grand final rang out like an ironic echo in his glass office, marking the beginning of days that would, without him even knowing it, change his destiny forever. The man watched his reflection in the glass, adjusting the knot of his tie with a precise gesture as he savored the calculated move he was about to make. On his desk, a golden envelope lay open, its impeccable handwriting a testament to his careful planning, each letter radiating pure arrogance. This invitation wasn't just a gesture, it was his meticulously planned revenge. He wanted Mia Brooks, the woman who had abandoned him when he was just starting out, to see with her own eyes the life of luxury he now enjoyed. His office, a modern temple of glass and steel in Melbourne's Docklands, reflected the glistening waters of the bay and the city's lively buzz. From up here, the world seemed ordered, designed just for him, as if everything he'd ever dreamed of had been conquered. But beneath that polished surface, the memory of Mia remained a splinter lodged deep inside. Aidan Miller, his trusted assistant, entered with cautious steps. He held the golden envelope as if it were a secret, something that weighed more than it looked. His voice was respectful, though it trembled slightly. "Are you sure about this, sir?" Hayden didn't take his eyes off the mirror. "Absolutely. I want her to receive it personally, to see everything she lost when she left me." Aidan took a deep breath. He'd known his boss for over 10 years and had rarely seen him so obsessed. "With all due respect, inviting your ex-wife to your wedding seems a bit much." Hayden cut him off with a brusque wave of his hand. "I didn't ask for your opinion. Just make sure this envelope gets to her studio. I want it in her hands today." The silence was broken by the distant crackle of fireworks, a regular thing during the footy finals. The city was alive, its streets packed with people, the air thick with the smell of popcorn and hot dogs. From his lofty perch, Hayden could see the plumes of smoke rising between the buildings. It was a reminder that while everyone else was celebrating, he was busy planning his own private spectacle. The door opened again, and Isabel Davies, his fiancée, appeared. She wore a perfectly tailored navy dress and a smile that seemed a little too practiced. "My love, are you still obsessed with this idea?" she asked with forced sweetness. Hayden responded without looking at her, still fixated on his reflection. "It's not an idea. It's a certainty. Mia is coming to our wedding." Isabel leaned a hand on the doorframe. "Don't you think it's a bit childish?" Hayden let out a dry laugh. "Childish? That woman left me when we lived in a tiny flat and I was working 18-hour days. She didn't believe in me. Now I'm one of the country's most successful businessmen. I want her to see what she lost." Aidan, who still held the envelope, tried to intervene one last time. "Sir, the invitations are being sent tomorrow. This would be the only one to go out today." Hayden picked up a gold pen and scribbled a personal note on the card. "Life rewards those who take risks and punishes those who give up." He then sealed the envelope with a solemn flourish. "Let Mia read it with her own eyes. I want her to see the mansion, The cars, the success, everything that could have been hers. Isabel watched in silence, feigning indifference, though inside she was boiling with doubt. She knew that dragging his ex-wife into the wedding could have unpredictable consequences. Yet she also knew that Hayden was a man who wouldn't tolerate being crossed. With a smile that didn't reach her eyes, she leaned in to kiss his cheek and whispered, "I hope you know what you're doing." The atmosphere in the office grew tense. Outside, the city's buzz continued to build, with footy songs playing from car radios and tourists yelling out in celebration. Inside, the air felt heavy, as if the decision to send that envelope had sealed something far bigger than just a simple wedding. Aidan put the envelope in his briefcase with a resigned sigh. He wondered if he was a partner in a crazy scheme or a witness to a long-awaited showdown. He knew that delivering that invitation would open doors that might never be closed again. Before leaving, he turned to Hayden, trying once more. "Don't you think you're going too far?" Hayden turned around, his eyes shining with pride. "On the contrary, this is just the beginning." The office clock read 6 in the afternoon. The sun was bathing the white facades of the cultural complex, and the orange reflections made everything seem to glow with the same intensity as the distant stadium lights. Hayden, his eyes on the horizon, pictured the scene. Mia walking into the hotel, confronting his success, surrounded by the high society he had always dreamed of joining. The vision gave him a dark, almost childish but all-consuming satisfaction. Aidan finally left the office, closing the door carefully. In the hallway, the echo of his footsteps sounded strange, as if the calm of the building was hiding a secret. The briefcase felt heavier than usual, and each step in the lift seemed to be taking him to a destination none of them had fully considered. Inside, Hayden was left alone. He lit the lamp on his desk and ran his hand over the marble surface. He was a man who had everything: money, recognition, power. But in his heart, the same old wound still throbbed, the same voice reminding him that he hadn't been good enough to keep Mia. Now, in his mind, that wound would finally close with one final victory, with the image of his ex-wife witnessing the life he had built without her. The city's noise intensified as night fell. From his window, Hayden gazed at the lights of the city and the glow of the fireworks, convinced that his plan was perfect. Aidan, meanwhile, stayed silent, knowing that the golden envelope could unleash a family-sized disaster. Mia Brooks never expected to receive an envelope with elegant handwriting that would stir up all her memories. The golden card rested on the table in her small studio in Fitzroy, surrounded by old cameras and undeveloped film. The afternoon light streamed in through the open balcony, illuminating the shiny paper that seemed to weigh more than all her photographic equipment combined. The echo of the stadium roar continued to resonate from the nearby streets, reminding her that Melbourne was in the middle of a major celebration. However, in this corner filled with memories, the party felt a million miles away. Mia stared at the envelope as if it were a strange object, an unexpected visitor that carried with it a past she had tried to bury for years. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside, she found the invitation that confirmed what she had already suspected. Hayden Sterling was getting married. The handwriting was unmistakable, impeccable, almost arrogant. Mia read the words in silence and felt a lump in her throat. It wasn't just an invitation, it was a declaration of power, a message directed straight at her. Beside her, Sam adjusted the lens of a digital camera. He had inherited his mother's passion for capturing moments, although he still did it just for fun. The teenager, still in his scruffy school uniform, looked up as he noticed the heavy silence. "What have you got there, Mum?" he asked, not really caring at first. Mia swallowed hard before answering. "It's an invitation." Sam put the camera on the table and walked closer. "From who?" She looked at him, no longer able to hide the truth. "From your dad." The words echoed in the room like thunder. Sam's eyes widened in surprise, then filled with anger. "My dad? The same one. I don't even know his real name. Mia took a deep breath. She knew that sooner or later she would have to face this conversation. His name is Hayden Sterling, and he's getting married. Sam pursed his lips, trying to process what he was hearing. And I'm just finding this out now. Just like that, all of a sudden. The tension grew even thicker when the boy pulled a crumpled envelope out of his backpack. While we're talking about dads, I was given this at the hospital today. They're the results of my medical tests. Mia felt a shiver as she opened the paper. The diagnosis was clear. The same hereditary heart condition that Hayden had suffered from in his youth. Her face went pale. "Why did you never tell me he had heart problems?" Sam asked with a hint of accusation. Mia sat down heavily in the chair, unable to meet her son's gaze. "Because I thought you hadn't inherited it. I never wanted you to grow up with that fear." The teenager clenched his fists. "Great, another gift from a dad who doesn't even know me." Mia watched him, her heart aching. The resemblance to Hayden was undeniable. The same dark hair, the same bright eyes, the same gestures of frustration. She felt like she could no longer hide the truth. Maybe it's time he knew. Sam looked at her in disbelief. "What? You want to go to his wedding?" Mia nodded slowly. "I want him to know he has a son. I was always scared of his reaction. But I can't wait any longer. You're his firstborn and he has the resources to help you." The boy shook his head firmly. "I don't need his money." "It's not just about money, Sam. It's about your health, about your right to know your whole story." The conversation was interrupted when the phone rang. It was Lucy Ford, her best friend and a doctor, confirming an appointment with the cardiologist for the following week. Mia answered in a low voice, grateful to have someone to support her in this moment of uncertainty. After hanging up, she walked over to her son and hugged him. "We're going to this wedding, Sam. Not for revenge, not for his money, but because it's time for the truth to come out." The teenager was silent for a few seconds, processing the idea. "What if he hates me? What if it hurts you?" Mia held him tightly. "He can't hurt us more than he already has with his absence." The afternoon continued, and through the window came the sounds of neighbors putting up lights and streamers for the grand final celebrations. The air smelled of hot dogs and freshly made donuts. Melbourne was still buzzing with excitement, while inside the studio, the atmosphere was charged with raw emotion. Sam flopped onto the sofa, staring at the ceiling. "Do you reckon I look as much like him as they say in the old photos?" he asked with a mix of fear and curiosity. Mia sighed, stroking her son's hair. "We'll see. But what matters most is who you are, not who you look like." In that moment, she decided to send a message confirming her attendance at the wedding. Her fingers hovered over the screen before she hit send. She knew that decision would open old wounds, but it was also the only way to close the circle. The golden invitation remained on the table, shining with an almost ironic glow under the afternoon light. Mia looked at it with determination, knowing there was no turning back. With tears in her eyes, she said in a low voice, "It's time for him to know." The ballroom of the St. Kilda Grand Hotel was buzzing with preparations for the wedding of the year. The sea breeze wafted in through the open balconies, mixing with the scent of native flowers that adorned every corner. The staff moved with precision, laying out white tablecloths, crystal glasses, and arrangements of fresh lilies. Hayden Sterling walked among them with a look of satisfaction, checking every detail as if it were a major business presentation. Around him, the buzz of the organizers mingled with the distant sound of the ocean and the crackle of fireworks coming from the city, as the grand final celebrations were in full swing. Meanwhile, in a modest flat in Fitzroy, Mia Brooks was adjusting her son's tie in front of an old mirror. The contrast between the two worlds couldn't have been greater. There was no luxury or grand decorations, just walls covered in family photos, cameras on shelves, and a wooden table where Sam's medical papers rested. The woman took a deep breath, trying to appear calm despite the tension in her chest. "I can't believe we're actually doing this," the boy murmured, watching himself in the mirror. The black suit highlighted his youthful features, and the resemblance to Hayden was even more obvious. "You're nervous, aren't you?" Mia asked gently. Sam nodded, looking down. "We're going to ruin his perfect wedding," Mia corrected him firmly. "We're not going to ruin anything. We're just going to tell the truth." At the hotel, Hayden was hosting a pre-wedding dinner with some of his business partners. The tables were filled with glasses of Shiraz, fancy canapes, and conversations about investments. Hayden raised his glass with pride, convinced that this night would mark his ultimate triumph. "Tomorrow will be unforgettable," he said, and everyone nodded amid laughter and congratulations. But in a corner, Isabel Davies watched the scene with an uneasy expression. She had spent the last few days going over documents that confirmed what she feared, the existence of Sam. She kept a hidden dossier in her hotel room, filled with photos, newspaper clippings, and medical notes. Her mind was torn between the need to protect her position and the fear of losing everything if the truth came out. That same night, in the Fitzroy flat, Mia received a message from her friend Lucy Ford. "Are you sure about this? Hayden can be very vindictive." Mia read it in silence, stroking her son's shoulder. She didn't reply immediately, but her thoughts were clear. The time had come to face the past. Not for her, but for Sam. The boy sat on the bed, looking at an old album of photos of his mum. "What if he hates us?" he asked in a low voice. Mia knelt in front of him, holding his hands. "He can't hurt us more than he already has with his absence. You have the right to know your story." The next day dawned with a clear blue sky and a festive air. The hotel was dressed for a gala, while in the city the partygoers were getting ready for the final celebrations. In the main ballroom, organizers were putting the final touches on the flowers and lighting. Hayden gave instructions with a confident tone, convinced that his plan to humiliate Mia was under control. "I want her to have a front row seat," he told Aidan Miller, his assistant. "I want her to see every detail." Aidan nodded in silence, though inside he doubted the strategy. Meanwhile, Mia was helping Sam with his cufflinks. The boy, still unsure, looked at himself in the mirror again. "It's like I'm looking at him 20 years ago," he said, his voice trembling. Mia looked at him with a mix of tenderness and pain. She knew the resemblance would be impossible to hide from Hayden and all the guests. "Remember," she whispered, "we're just here to tell the truth." As guests arrived at the hotel, Isabel remained alone in her room, looking over the dossier again and again. The photos of Sam, so like Hayden, tormented her. Her hands trembled as she closed the folder and hid it in a drawer. She looked at herself in the mirror, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "If this comes out, I'll lose everything," she muttered to herself. Outside, the music of the string quartet was already playing, and the first toasts could be heard in the ballroom. The night promised to be long and brilliant, but beneath that perfect surface, a secret was about to explode. Isabel, on the main staircase, clutched the dossier to her chest and whispered, "There's no turning back now." The bells of the cathedral rang out as guests arrived at the hotel, with no idea of the spectacle that was about to unfold. The sound travelled from the city centre to the coast, mixing with the gentle murmur of the sea, lapping the sand in front of the St. Kilda Grand. The afternoon was clear and bright, and a breeze filled with the scent of native flowers wafted into the open foyer, where staff were arranging flower bouquets and a string quartet was rehearsing soft tunes that floated like silk. The echo of Sam's words from the night before was still in Mia's mind. "It's time for him to know." That phrase had struck her heart like a bell, rhythmic and determined. She and her son got out of a taxi in front of the hotel, and the gleam of the crystals, the impeccable uniforms of the doorman, and the pristine carpet made them feel like they were stepping into a world that didn't belong to them. Mia took a deep breath. adjusted the small bag where she carried the medical papers, and held Sam's arm firmly. Inside, the foyer seemed like an ordered sea of low-voiced conversations. The high lamps cast reflections on the marble. There were arrangements of flowers and white lilies, and the smell of fresh perfume mixed with the coffee some waiters were serving in small cups. The quartet played long notes, and photographers from a social magazine waited discreetly next to a column, ready to capture perfect smiles. The grand final atmosphere was still in the air. Somewhere nearby, a firework exploded, loud and celebratory. Hayden Sterling strode through the foyer with confident steps, greeting two business partners and a journalist who shook his hand with admiration. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, a gleaming tie pin, and the look of an executive accustomed to giving orders and being obeyed. He stopped next to the desk where the organizers were working and took out his phone to check a list of the guests' arrival protocol. Beside him, Aidan Miller held a folder and tried to keep up, jotting down last-minute changes. "Make sure Mia gets a front-row seat," Hayden said without raising his voice. "Just like I'm giving a technical detail, I want her to see the ceremony from the best angle." Aidan's jaw tightened and his pen paused over the paper. "Sir, with all due respect, if the press finds out your ex-wife is here, it could be a problem," he said in a lower voice. "The photographers are already on edge. They've been asking about surprises, and I'm worried that—" Hayden cut him off with a slight shake of his head. "It's not the press's business, it's my business. Just do as I say," he replied, with the cold calm of a man closing a deal. Aidan nodded, but the gesture felt heavy. He let out a sigh that was lost in the sound of the quartet. Mia and Sam walked through the main door, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow down. The light from outside followed them for a few steps, creating a halo around their figures. Sam wore a dark suit and a simple tie. His youth couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders, nor that mix of pride and fear that made him stand taller than usual. Mia approached the desk, politely asked for directions to the main ballroom, and thanked the woman with a "thank you very much" that sounded firm, almost professional, as if politeness was her way of protecting herself. A few meters away, Hayden saw them. It wasn't an immediate recognition, but one that grew inside him like a rising tide. First Mia's silhouette, then the set of her chin, and finally the boy's eyes. Those eyes that seemed to belong to a time he thought he had forgotten. Hayden's heart leaped, and for a moment the sound of the quartet faded for him, as if someone had slammed a door in his ears. He took one step, then another, unsure whether to greet them or to retreat. The guests began to murmur, first with curiosity, then with that electrical spark that ignites rumors. "Who are they?" asked a woman with a fan. "She looks like someone from the old photos," whispered a gentleman, leaning towards his wife. A waiter passed with a tray of glasses, and the vibration in the air made his hands tremble. The flashes of two photographers went off briefly, as if a reflection had tricked them. Isabel Davies was descending the main staircase in an ivory dress, elegant and understated. For a moment she held her gaze on the scene, and she noticed the invisible line that connected Hayden to this boy who had just entered. She recognized the resemblance at first glance, and something clenched in her stomach. She carried a small rigid purse where, on another occasion, she had hidden a dossier. She wasn't carrying it now, but the weight of the information was with her all the same. She gripped the handrail with her gloved hand, forcing herself to continue down, to smile as was expected of a bride, about to step into her big day. Mia noticed the silence that opened up with each of her steps, not as a void, but as a ripple in the water. Her fingers found Sam's pulse, and it was warm, with an accelerated rhythm. "Easy," she said quietly. "Breathe." He felt her, in an almost imperceptible way. He looked at his reflection in a mirrored column, and for a moment he thought he saw the shadow of his father in the same place, as if the foyer was reflecting two overlapping moments in time. Hayden got close enough that only they could hear him. "What are you doing here, Mia?" he asked, his voice shaking. Mia said, with a voice that wanted to sound neutral, but from which a trace of surprise escaped. She tilted her head, not breaking eye contact. "Good afternoon," she replied, with a dry politeness. Sam took half a step forward. He didn't hide behind his mother. He fixed his eyes on Hayden's, and the resemblance, seen face to face, was no longer a suspicion. It was a knockout blow. A violin string broke on a high note, and the quartet stopped for a second, just long enough for the whole foyer to breathe at the same time. "Welcome," Hayden managed to say, and the word sounded strange in his own mouth. "We can talk somewhere quieter." "We came to sit in the ceremony as guests," Mia replied, slowly, so there would be no doubt. "We'll talk afterwards." The boy didn't take his eyes off Hayden, and in that gaze there was a question and an accusation, but also a living curiosity that kept him standing tall. Hayden appeared beside them, discreetly, and leaned towards Hayden. "The press is in the side garden," he murmured. "If they see you all together, they'll start asking questions." Hayden didn't respond immediately. A muscle in his cheek twitched. "Make sure no one gets close," he finally said, "and make sure they have a front row seat." Hayden swallowed hard. "Yes, sir," he replied, not hiding his unease. He turned to a coordinator, pointed to the seats, and before walking away, he looked at Sam with a brief gesture of respect. Several people tried to resume their conversations. The quartet started playing again, a little softer, and a waiter offered Mia a glass of water. She took the glass and thanked him with a "thanks," almost inaudible. The cool glass calmed her hand. Sam took a deep breath, as if the coolness of the foyer was restoring his balance. The nearness of the sea could be felt, a salty dampness that dampened the scent of the lilies. Sunbeams came in from the walkway, painting golden stripes on the tiles. The ceremony chairs were arranged beyond the foyer, behind an arch of flowers. A receptionist approached to guide them. "This way, please," she said politely. Mia thought of the first time she had come hand in hand with Hayden to a fancy event many years ago. She remembered her simple dress and her awkwardness with the cutlery. She also remembered his promise that, when everything was better, they would return to that place as a family. Now, she was returning hand in hand with her son, and the promise had taken on a whole new meaning. Sam didn't take his eyes off Hayden as they took a few steps forward. Hayden watched him, still stunned. Time seemed to come together like two waves crashing, creating a spray. The guests parted for them with a mix of politeness and curiosity. An elderly couple leaned towards them and whispered a good afternoon that sounded sincere. That small, everyday Aussie gesture gave Mia and Sam a thread of normality to hold on to. The quartet reached the end of their piece, and a polite silence fell, a silence that seemed to hold every gaze in its place. Sam fixed his blue eyes on Hayden's, creating an awkward silence that interrupted the music. The breathing of those present became cautious, as if everyone feared breaking something fragile. At the top of the staircase, her gaze fixed on the perfect triangle the three of them formed. Isabel took a step forward, and the glint of the handrail crossed her chest like a line of light. The murmuring turned into a buzz when Mia took a step forward. The guests, dressed in their finest, looked at each other, surprised that the tense silence in the foyer was transferring to the main ballroom with such force. The string quartet had resumed its melody, but the musicians gradually lowered the volume, unable to keep up in an atmosphere already charged with tension. On the golden ceiling, the lights cast reflections on the crystal glasses, and the social photographers quickly focused their cameras, aware that something extraordinary was happening. In the air, there remained the undeniable echo of the resemblance between Sam and Hayden. Some guests whispered with disbelief, while others took discreet photos on their phones. An older businessman whispered, "He's identical to Hayden when he was young." A woman with a fan covered her mouth, unable to hide her surprise. Mia felt that the moment had arrived. She had kept silent for years, swallowing the truth to protect her son. But tonight, she couldn't hide it any longer. She looked at Sam, who stood firm beside her, and squeezed his hand. Mia's voice rose clear, though her heart was pounding. "This is your son." The words echoed in the ballroom like a thunderclap, and the music suddenly stopped. The echo spread through the hall, so loud that even those in the back heard it clearly. The murmuring turned into stifled gasps, into a contained chaos of looks that went from Hayden to Sam and from Sam to Mia. The boy stood up straight, though he felt his legs trembling. The photographers began to fire their flashes without rest. The white light flooded the room, capturing tense faces and shocked expressions. Hayden, standing near the makeshift altar, was frozen. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He looked at Mia with a look of disbelief and then at Sam, unable to deny what his own eyes were confirming. The silence lasted only a few seconds, until the guests all started talking at once. "It can't be. He's just like him. Why did she never say anything?" The noise grew into a roar of voices that bounced off the vaulted ceiling. A journalist took the opportunity to raise his camera and start a live broadcast. The image of Hayden frozen beside the boy who was his teenage reflection became a public spectacle. Hayden finally reacted. He took a step forward, his breath hitched. "What is the meaning of this?" he asked, his voice broken. Mia didn't lower her gaze. "It means what you see. Sam is your son." Hayden swallowed hard, but couldn't say anything else. The resemblance was irrefutable, and Sam's eyes, so identical to his own, disarmed him. Then, an unexpected voice broke the silence. Isabel Davies, from one of the steps, her face pale, held the gaze of everyone present. "I knew the whole time." The murmuring changed. Now the looks were directed at her, who was slowly descending in her shining ivory dress. Her confession landed like a new blow, and the guests' discomfort became even more obvious. Hayden turned to her sharply. "What did you say?" Isabel took a deep breath. "I hired a private investigator months ago. I found out everything about Mia and the boy. I was scared that if you knew before the wedding you'd leave me." Her voice was trembling, but she held her head high. The flashes went off again. The chaos intensified. Some guests were getting out of their chairs, others were looking for the exit, and the musicians were discreetly abandoning their instruments. Sam looked down, feeling the ground move beneath his feet. Mia stroked his shoulder, whispering for him to breathe, that he wasn't alone. Hayden clenched his fists, his face contorted. His eyes darted between Isabel and Mia, between betrayal and the revealed truth. Anger rose in his throat like fire, and in a loud, almost shouted voice, he uttered the words no one expected to hear. "The wedding is off." The announcement echoed in the ballroom like a final bell. The guests rose in a mass, some murmuring with discomfort, others taking the opportunity to leave in a hurry. The waiters left their trays on the tables and retreated, confused. The string quartet packed up their instruments in silence. The great ceremony that promised to be the wedding of the year had collapsed in a matter of minutes. Isabel let go of the small bag she was carrying and let it fall to the floor. The dry sound of the metal clasp echoed on the marble. Her lips tightened, and tears began to stream down her face. Hayden looked at her with a mix of fury and disappointment. "You hid the truth from me," he said in a low voice, but everyone heard. "How could you expect me to marry you?" Isabel tried to approach, reaching out a hand. "I did it out of fear. I didn't want to lose you." But Hayden looked away, unable to listen anymore. Sam, still in the center of the room, looked at his mum with anguish. "Mum, this was a mistake," he whispered. But Mia held his hand firmly. "No, son, it was necessary." The photographers captured every gesture, every tear, every word. The chaos could no longer be stopped. Aidan appeared near the entrance, trying to hold back the journalists. "No cameras allowed in here," he repeated firmly, though he knew it was useless. The damage was done. The scandal was already spreading faster than any previous rumor. The air grew thick, charged with tension and looks that burned. The hotel, which should have been the stage for a celebration, had become a battleground of emotions and broken truths. Hayden remained standing, his face hardened, looking at Mia and Sam. He knew nothing would ever be the same again. Hayden, his face contorted, yells, "The wedding is off!" As the lights flicker and the guests begin to leave, the doors of the ballroom closed, leaving only the main characters facing the naked truth. The echo of the guests' voices still resonated in the hallways, like a distant rumor that was slowly fading with the sound of footsteps and the click of cameras moving towards the street. Inside the hotel's private restaurant, the silence was heavy, broken only by the clinking of abandoned glasses on the tables and the tired sigh of a waiter clearing away withered flowers without daring to look up. The echo of Hayden's scream still vibrated on the walls. The wedding is off. That phrase, thrown in a fit of rage, had brought down the facade of success and pride he had built for years. Now, with his tie loose and his hands clenched, he looked like a different man, more vulnerable. Stuck between bewilderment and the need for answers, Mia and Sam sat at one of the back tables, under a dim lamp that barely lit their faces. Hayden stood in front of them, as if he didn't know where to begin. "Why now?" he finally asked, his voice low. Mia held his gaze without blinking. "Because we couldn't wait any longer. Because he had the right to know the truth." Hayden closed his eyes for a moment, as if the answer physically hurt him. Sam, with his arms crossed over his chest, looked at him with a mix of anger and defiance. "And you?" the boy said. "Where were you when we needed you?" Hayden's jaw tightened. "I didn't know you existed," Mia interrupted him harshly. "You didn't know because you never asked, because when I wanted to talk about family, all you could hear was numbers, contracts, and meetings. You went after your business and I was left alone." Mia's voice trembled, but it didn't lose its firmness. The boy looked at both of them, feeling that each word was a fragment of a puzzle that was finally coming together in front of him. The silence returned for a few seconds. Outside, the finals fireworks boomed in the distance, a reminder that the city was still celebrating, while in that room, another kind of battle was being fought. Sam slammed his fist on the table, and the dry sound made the glasses rattle. "I don't need your money. I need you to understand what you lost," he exclaimed, holding back tears. His voice broke, and for a moment his teenage pride crumbled, showing the real wound. Mia tried to calm him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Son, easy." But he shook his head. "No, Mum. He needs to hear this. He needs to understand what it means to grow up without a dad. To see all my mates with their dads at footy matches at school meetings while I made up excuses to explain your absence, Hayden." The words, "your absence," sounded like a punch, and Hayden felt the air leave his lungs. With firm steps, Lucy appeared at the door. She was still wearing her white lab coat under her jacket, and her bag was slung over her shoulder. She had rushed there after Mia's phone call. "Sorry to interrupt, but this can't wait," she said seriously. The three of them looked at her in surprise. "Sam needs immediate medical attention. The results are clear. His heart requires urgent care and monitoring." The silence became even heavier, and the air was filled with a new seriousness. Hayden sank into a chair, resting his forehead in his hand. "My condition," he murmured. "He inherited it." Lucy nodded calmly. "Yes, and it's not something we can ignore. It requires changes to his routine, medication, and frequent checkups. If we face this together, there's hope." Mia squeezed her son's hand while he looked away, his breathing rapid. Outside the room, Aidan was trying to hold back the journalists who were still waiting for news. "No statements," he repeated firmly as he closed the corridor door and moved people away. Inside, however, the atmosphere was so intimate it felt like a confessional. Isabel had left through a side exit of the hotel, with tears in her eyes and a hurried suitcase. Her story with Hayden had ended in that very instant, with no chance of a return. Sam broke the silence. "I don't want you to treat me like a project or a debt. I just want you to be my dad." Hayden looked up, and in those young eyes he recognized the same intensity he had felt in his own youth, the same struggle to be heard. "I want to be here for you," he replied, his voice hoarse. "I don't know how, but I want to try." Mia watched him with disbelief, still unable to fully trust him. But for the first time she saw a crack of sincerity. Lucy put her papers away and closed her bag. "We should get him to the hospital as soon as possible," she said in a professional tone. "There's no time to lose." Mia nodded immediately, stroking Sam's hair. The boy, though scared, accepted with a tired nod. Hayden stood up, ready to go with them. The noise of the city continued to boom with fireworks and music, but in that room, the biggest bang was the truth that, after 15 years, could no longer be hidden. Lucy takes a deep breath and says seriously, "Sam needs immediate medical attention." The waiting room of the Royal Melbourne Hospital was silent, broken only by the distant murmur of the speakers announcing consultation numbers and the metallic rattle of a cleaning trolley passing in the hallway. The air smelled of disinfectant, and the white walls returned a coldness that made time feel heavier. Mia was sitting next to Sam, holding his hand tightly. The boy tried to look tough, but his eyes darted from side to side, following the nurses who passed by, the doctors with folders in their hands, and the patients who came and went from appointments. Lucy's words at the hotel still echoed in his ears. "Sam needs immediate medical attention." Mia remembered her friend's tone, firmer than ever, and felt there was no escape. They had arrived at the hospital in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Hayden was with them, but he had stayed standing a few steps behind, his gaze fixed on the floor and his hands in his suit pockets. He wasn't used to this kind of environment. Business meetings and auditoriums were his territory, but the hospital corridors, with their smell of urgency and fragility, seemed foreign and painfully intimate. A doctor in a white lab coat finally came out of a door and called Sam's name. "You can come in." The voice was neutral, but Mia felt a chill. She immediately stood up and helped her son to his feet. Hayden took a step forward, hesitating whether to go with them or wait outside. Sam looked at him sideways, and for the first time he was the one who took the initiative. "Come on," he said in a dry tone, but it was enough for Hayden to follow him. The consultation room was small, lit with cold light. There was a screen with heart graphs and a desk with perfectly organized papers. The doctor introduced himself as Dr. Miller, a specialist in pediatric cardiology. He sat down, reviewed the results, and then looked up at them. "The tests confirm what we suspected. Sam has the same heart condition that his father had in his youth." Mia squeezed her son's hand, while Hayden shifted in his chair, as if the phrase had hit him directly in the chest. "What exactly does that mean?" Mia asked in a tense voice. The doctor spoke calmly. "It means he requires constant monitoring. He'll need daily medication, regular checkups, and it's likely he'll have to limit certain sports or intense efforts. It's not a death sentence, but it's a path that requires discipline and care." Sam looked down, and for the first time fear was clearly visible on his face. "I can't play footy anymore," he murmured. Dr. Miller shook his head gently. "Not at a competitive level. You can lead a normal life, but with precautions. The key will be medical control and responsibility." Hayden leaned forward as if he had suddenly woken up from a daze. "Doctor, is there any more advanced treatment, any alternative?" Dr. Miller looked at him seriously. "There are options for monitoring with devices, clinical studies, but the most important thing is not to delay care. With the family's commitment, Sam can live many years without serious complications." Hayden nodded quickly and then turned to Mia. "I can take care of the expenses, everything that's needed." Sam's head snapped up. His blue eyes shone with indignation. "I don't need your money," he exclaimed, his voice cracking. "Mum looked after me all these years without you. Don't show up now with your checkbooks. It's not about that." The silence that followed was so thick that Mia felt the air could be cut with a knife. Hayden looked down, and for the first time in a long time he seemed small, vulnerable, with no armor to protect him. Mia stroked her son's arm. "Easy," she said softly. "Listen to the doctor." Sam took a deep breath, still panting. The doctor waited a few seconds before continuing. "The most important thing is that he understands he's not alone. He'll need emotional support. Beyond the medical stuff, he can't live in fear. He needs to learn to deal with his condition." Lucy appeared at the door at that moment with a folder in her hand. She had come to be there not just as a doctor, but as Mia's friend. "I've spoken to the specialists," she explained, walking in with calm steps. "The prognosis is good if we follow the treatment, but the essential thing is that you do it together. Neither of you can carry this alone." Her eyes moved from Mia to Hayden, stopping for a second on each, as if underlining with her gaze what her words demanded. Outside in the foyer, Aidan was standing, answering calls from journalists. In a tired voice, he repeated the same thing over and over. "No statements. Please respect their privacy." He knew the story was already all over the city, that the headlines would talk about the businessman whose wedding was ruined by the appearance of a hidden son. But inside the hospital, that noise seemed distant, as if the real urgency was in a young heart that needed to beat without fear. Dr. Miller handed over a sheet with the treatment plan. "Here are the instructions. Daily medication, a controlled diet, avoid strenuous efforts. We'll do a review in a month." Mia took the paper carefully, as if she were holding glass. Hayden leaned in to look at it too, but Sam pushed him away with a look. "We'll read it," he said in a low voice. Hayden stood still, swallowing hard. Lucy closed her folder and spoke softly. "Sam, you're not just a patient. You're a brilliant young man, and this doesn't define who you are. It's a challenge, yes, but not a condemnation. And now that your dad is here, you can learn from someone who's already been through the same thing." Sam looked at him with suspicion. "You too?" Hayden nodded slowly. "Yes, I also had to give up things. But I found other things. And even though I did it alone, I don't want you to do it without support." The boy was silent, torn between resentment and a spark of curiosity. Mia watched him, her heart divided between anger at Hayden and the desire for Sam to find some balance. Outside, the afternoon sun was filtering through the hospital windows, gilding the corridors with an unexpectedly warm light. Lucy sighed and said slowly, "The treatment will be long, but not impossible if you face it together." The phrase hung in the room like a promise, like a shared challenge that the three of them had to take on from that moment on. The intense aroma of coffee filled the cafe as Mia, Hayden and Sam sat at the same table for the first time. The place, with its high-walled, ornate decor and crystal chandeliers, seemed like a timeless refuge. Around them, tourist couples were quietly talking about their city itineraries. A group of students ordered milkshakes and donuts, and at the counter, a waiter was serving sweet wine to two elderly ladies who were discussing the footy finals. Life in Melbourne went on as normal, but for the three of them, this meeting was a world apart. The memory of the hospital consultation was still fresh. Dr. Miller's voice had been clear. Sam would need lifelong care, and the only way to handle it was with family support. Mia had insisted they take a breather, and Lucy had suggested a quiet place to talk. That's how they ended up in that cafe in the city, famous for its long conversations, at a table in the most reserved corner, surrounded by mirrors and paintings that reflected a deceptive calm. Hayden broke the silence. "I remember the first time I came in here," he said, looking at the painted ceiling. "I was young, I had no money. I ordered a coffee and stayed for hours dreaming about what I would be one day." Mia raised an eyebrow. "Dreaming about empires, not families," she replied softly. Hayden sighed, looking down. Sam, who was distractedly stirring sugar in his drink, looked up. "You really used to come here?" he asked in a neutral tone. "Yeah," Hayden replied, "and I promised myself I'd come back when I was a success. And here I am, though not in the way I expected." The boy pursed his lips, hesitating. Mia encouraged him with a look. "Say what you're thinking," she whispered. Sam took a deep breath. "I don't want you to look at me as a symbol of your success or your mistakes. I just want you to be my dad. Can you do that?" The question hung in the air. Hayden shifted in his chair, surprised by the directness. "I want to try," he said slowly, "even though I don't know how." A waiter approached to leave a plate of pumpkin donuts sprinkled with sugar on the table. "Here you go," he said politely, and Mia thanked him with a cordial, "Thanks." That everyday gesture brought a little bit of normality back to the scene. Sam picked up one of the donuts, but barely took a bite. He was nervous, and the food tasted like nothing. "I don't want empty promises," he added, looking at his dad. "If you say you're going to be there, I want you to mean it." Hayden nodded seriously. "I get it. I won't talk about money or empires. I'll talk about just being present." "That's what you want, right?" Sam hesitated for a few seconds and then nodded in affirmation. Mia watched them in silence with a mix of distrust and relief. She had waited for this moment for years, and seeing it finally happen gave her a contradictory feeling. The cafe clock read 6:30. Outside, the city was getting ready for another round of fireworks, and the afternoon shadows were filtering in through the high windows. The buzz of nearby conversations created a background that made the conversation at their table feel more intimate. Hayden leaned towards Sam. "I'd like to know more about you. What are you into?" "Besides photography?" The boy hesitated. "Coding. I'm working on a project to monitor heartbeats, something that could help me and other people." Hayden looked at him with surprise, almost with pride. "That's amazing. I'd love to see it." Mia interjected. "Don't try to take credit for his successes, Hayden. He got here without you." The phrase sounded harsh, but Hayden accepted it with a slow nod. "I know," he said, "and that's why I want to start being present now." Sam leaned back in his chair. "The school science fair is in a week. If you really want to be there, then come. Don't hide behind your meetings." The tension rose again. Hayden looked at him firmly. "I'll be there," he replied, "even if I have to cancel everything else." Sam raised his eyebrows, skeptical. "For real?" Hayden nodded. "For real." Mia watched him, trying to figure out if this promise was just another in a long line of them. At that moment, Aidan appeared at the door. He looked tired and approached the table discreetly. "Sir," he said, "the press is still hounding us. I've tried to get rid of them, but they're not going to stop chasing the story." Hayden gestured for him to calm down. "Make sure they don't bother Mia or Sam, and don't make up any excuses. If they ask, tell them the truth, that I was with my family." Aidan looked at him, surprised, but nodded. "Whatever you say," he replied, and walked away with a brief gesture towards Mia, as if apologizing for all the chaos. Mia took a sip of her coffee and put the cup down on the saucer gently. "I never thought I'd hear you say that word," she commented in a low voice. Hayden smiled with a hint of sadness. "Me neither, but I'm saying it now because I feel it." Sam watched the scene in silence, trying to believe in this change. The atmosphere of the cafe grew warmer as the minutes passed. Lucy called Mia to ask how they were doing. "We're okay," she replied, looking at her son and Hayden. "For now, we're okay." Sam picked up another donut and this time finished it. His eyes, though still full of caution, softened a little. Mia rested her elbows on the table and looked at her son. "Do you want to tell him yourself what you expect?" Sam took a deep breath. "I just want you to be honest, Dad. I don't want you to promise things you can't deliver. If you say you'll be at the fair, I want to see you there." Hayden looked at him intently. "I promise." The buzz of the cafe returned to fill the space, and for a moment, the three of them felt a part of the city's normality. Outside, the fireworks began to go off, and the colourful lights were reflected in the windows. Sam smiled slightly, as if he had found a little peace inside all that noise. Sam looks at his dad and asks, "Are you coming to my science fair? Or are you going to hide behind your meetings again?" The local high school was buzzing with students, posters and projects as the end-of-year celebrations continued to light up the city. The corridors were decorated with colourful posters, cables connecting laptops, and makeshift tables with models and experiments. Whole families were walking between the stands, applauding the young people who enthusiastically explained their ideas. The air smelled of a mix of freshly made donuts being sold at the entrance and fresh printer ink. The school racket was just as loud as the streets nearby, where the final fireworks were about to go off. In Mia's mind, what had happened the night before was still ringing. They had spent hours helping Sam prepare his model, adjusting cables and checking graphs. Hayden had surprised them both when he appeared with a screwdriver in his hand, kneeling to fix a part. "Let me help," he had said, and although the phrase seemed simple, to Mia it sounded like an unexpected gesture. Now, as they entered the school hall, Hayden walked beside them, dressed in a suit but without a tie, with a serious expression that revealed more nervousness than pride. Sam, wearing a light shirt and simple trousers, carefully adjusted his device on the table of his stand. It was a heart monitor system, designed to record heartbeats in real time and project them onto a screen. Mia approached and whispered, "Remember to talk slowly, sweetie. Everyone wants to understand you." Hayden placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and added, "You're ready. Trust in what you've created." Sam was nervous. Although the blush on his cheeks gave him away, the teachers and judges began to walk past the projects. One of them, a man with a white beard and round glasses, stopped in front of Sam and read the poster. "Heart monitoring in adolescents with hereditary risk." He looked up. "Interesting. Are you the test subject?" Sam took a deep breath. "Yes. I have the same heart condition my dad had." The murmuring of the other students nearby faded, and several eyes turned to Hayden, who was standing behind him, his eyes glistening. The boy continued, "I created this device to record my heartbeats. The idea is that any teenager can have real-time monitoring, receive alerts, and avoid complications." With steady hands, he connected the sensor to his wrist, and, on the screen, the irregular green lines of his heart rhythm appeared. "This is what pulses in me, and this system can help so that many others don't live in fear." The judges exchanged interested glances. One of them asked, "And how is this project funded?" Sam shrugged, "With recycled parts and hours of coding, but I believe that with support, it could go further." Hayden took a step forward. "I know what it's like to live with this condition," he said in a low voice. "And I know what it means to do it alone. My son won't be alone. This project deserves support, and I'm prepared to back it." The audience stirred, surprised by the confession. Hayden rarely spoke publicly about anything personal, let alone about his health. Mia looked at him with a mix of shock and caution. There was a sincere tone in his words that she hadn't heard in years. Sam watched him sideways, disbelieving at first, but then a spark of pride crossed his face. The device began to show the boy's heartbeats live. The screen flickered with green lines, and the hall filled with spontaneous applause. Students came closer, teachers nodded in approval, and some parents whispered that the project had a future. Mia felt her heart swell with warmth. For the first time, she saw her son not just as a teenager fighting a disease, but as a young man capable of turning his fragility into strength. The judges congratulated Sam and asked him to submit the project to a national competition. The boy smiled shyly. "I will," he replied, "but the most important thing to me is that this invention works and helps people." Hayden squeezed his son's shoulder with a mix of pride and humility, and Mia, standing beside them, let out a silent tear. As the afternoon went on, other students came up to congratulate him. One of them said, "Your project is the best I've ever seen." Another added, "If you want to patent it, I'll help you with the design." Sam laughed with a new kind of joy, as if the weight he had been carrying had suddenly become lighter. Mia took a photo with her old camera, capturing that moment of intimate victory. Outside, the streets of Melbourne roared with the sound of fireworks. The sky was beginning to darken, and the colourful lights were reflected in the windows of the school. The science fair continued, but for the three of them, that small stand was the true centre of the day. Sam smiled and whispered, "For the first time, I felt like we were a team." The bay sparkled in the afternoon light as Mia and Hayden walked together along the promenade. The air carried a salty, fresh smell, mixed with the distant smoke from the fireworks that were already lighting up the city centre. The balconies were full of tourists, sharing plates of fish and chips and raising glasses of wine, while street performers played soft songs that blended with the voices of the crowd. The city was alive, but for the two of them, that walk was a refuge, a pause after so many storms. After the science fair, the tension had given way to a new kind of trust. Sam's project had received applause and recognition, and Hayden had been there, standing and applauding with tears in his eyes. Mia had seen it, and she felt that something in him had truly changed. Now, they walked side by side, in silence, listening only to the murmur of the waves. Mia was the first to speak. "I never thought I'd live to see this," she said with a sigh. Hayden looked at her, his tie tucked away in his pocket and his suit jacket over his shoulder. "Me neither, but I'm glad this day has come." The Melbourne promenade was slowly lighting up with the streetlights, and the first flashes of the fireworks were reflected on the water. Mia stopped for a moment in front of the iron fence and rested her hands on it. "Hayden," she said in a low voice, 15 years have passed. 15 years I raised our son alone. I'm not telling you this to blame you, but because I need to say it." Hayden stopped beside her, his eyes fixed on the bay. "I know, and it hurts more than I can say. I believed that if I built an empire, if I accumulated power and money, everything else would fall into place. But I was wrong." Mia looked at him intently. "He doesn't need an empire. He needs you, not as a businessman, not as a millionaire, as a dad." Hayden looked down and nodded. "I lost too many years, but I want the ones that are left. I want to be there when he wakes up in the morning, when he goes for his medical checkups, when he presents new projects. I don't want to keep being a ghost in his life." Mia listened to him in silence, weighing every word. It wasn't easy to trust him after so much pain, but in Hayden's voice there was a sincerity she hadn't heard before. Suddenly, they heard light footsteps behind them. Sam came running up with a wide smile and his hair messed up by the wind. He was carrying a small backpack and raised his hand to greet them. "Sorry I'm late. I was chatting with my mates from school," he said happily. Mia smiled when she saw him and held out her arms. "Come here," she said. Sam approached and hugged his mum first, then looked at his dad with a hint of shyness. "What were you talking about?" he asked. Hayden looked at him gently. "About you," he replied. "About everything we want to get right from now on." The boy laughed softly. "Then I hope the list is a long one." He walked a few steps ahead and pointed to a small restaurant nearby where waiters were setting up tables outside. "How about we have dinner together at our place? We can get some takeaway." Mia looked at him surprised. "At our place?" Sam nodded. "Yeah, the three of us, as a family. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be ours." Hayden took a deep breath, as if those words were the greatest gift he could receive. "That sounds like a great idea." On their way to the restaurant, they passed several groups who were carrying paper and wooden figures for the fireworks show. The statues were waiting in the squares, ready to be burned in the middle of the celebrations. A little boy approached Sam and offered him a small sparkler. "Do you want to light it?" he asked innocently. Sam looked at his mum, who smiled and nodded. Hayden lit the fuse, and together they watched as the sparkler shot up into the sky and exploded in a green flash. The three of them laughed in unison, and for a moment they seemed to forget everything they had been through. At the restaurant, Lucy appeared unexpectedly. She had finished her shift at the hospital and decided to stop by to see them. "I didn't want to interrupt," she said kindly, "but I had to tell you something. The important thing isn't just the medicine, but how you look after each other." Mia hugged her with gratitude, and Hayden shook her hand respectfully. "Thanks for being there for us in the toughest moments," he added. Lucy smiled. "Now the moments will be better, I know it." She said goodbye with an affectionate gesture towards Sam, who replied with a shy smile. With bags of food in their hands, they walked back towards the car parked nearby. The sky above Melbourne was exploding with fireworks, and the crowds were gathering in the streets for the last night of the celebrations. The glow lit up the faces of the three of them, who were walking together as if they had reclaimed something they had lost. Mia stopped for a moment and watched her son walking between them. "I never imagined this moment," she confessed. Sam took her hand. "Me neither, but here we are." The promenade buzzed with the sound of music, voices, and the cheers of the people. The statues were beginning to burn in different squares, and the smoke was rising into the sky, taking with it a whole year's worth of memories. Mia thought that maybe that was a perfect symbol, the fire that burns the past, the light that opens up a different future. As they walked, Hayden looked at Mia seriously. "I know it won't be easy. There'll be arguments, there'll be bad days, but I want us to try." Mia watched him, and then looked at Sam, who was smiling with teenage innocence. "Maybe we won't have a perfect ending," she said in a low voice, "but we'll have a new beginning." The fireworks exploded in the sky with a grand finale that lit up the entire city. The bay reflected the colourful flashes, and the crowd cheered as the figures burned. For the three of them, that spectacle was more than just a party. It was a sign that the past could be left behind, and that the family, broken for years, could be rebuilt with patience, honesty, and love. The echo of the fireworks faded over the bay, and in that final glow, the image of a family was etched forever. A family that after years of silence and hurt had found a new way to walk together. It wasn't an easy return or an immediate reconciliation, but each shared step on the promenade, each word spoken with honesty, opened a path different from the one of pride and loneliness. In Sam's eyes, there was a new confidence, a warmth he had never felt before. And in Mia and Hayden's, a determination to make up for lost time, even if they knew that no promise could erase the absent years. What this story reminds us of is that it's always possible to start over, even when the scars seem too deep. Kindness, patience, and the courage to ask for forgiveness are the glue that holds a true home together. Just as fire reduces paper statues to ashes to make room for new creations, families can also be reborn from their own fires when love is stronger than resentment. As an old Aussie saying goes, "A fair go for everyone," and there's no more valuable inheritance than that of a genuine affection shared through everyday gestures. Maybe, as you hear this story, you'll remember someone with whom you still have something to say, a gesture to offer, a forgiveness to grant. Maybe it's time to realize that while there are no perfect endings, we can always give the gift of a new beginning. If this narrative touched your heart, share it with those you love, because sometimes a shared story is the spark that ignites the flame of reconciliation. And remember, like a lamp lit in a window in the middle of the night, a single act of kindness can light the way for those who are still looking for a way back home. What would you have done in Hayden's shoes when you saw your son for the very first time? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next story.